together and we had a discussion. Thank you, perfect. Okay, so these wonderful women came to me and said, can we learn? And they also, and we were discussing about what they wanted to learn in terms of increasing their Jewish knowledge and their spirituality. And part of what they said is that shul, they didn't really feel shul was for them. They didn't feel a connection with coming to shul. They found it very difficult, but they wanted more Judaism in their lives. So I said to them, do you know what? The truth is we actually spend far more time of our Jewish lives outside of shul than in it. So maybe, one second, sorry, I just made myself a bit bigger for all of you. So maybe it would be a good idea for us to think about the Judaism that we have in the home. So what we did on the first session, I'm going to do a scaled down model of this with you, is I gave them a picture of a house. And I said to them, I want to draw in whatever rooms you think should exist in the house. And then write in those rooms the names of the Jewish items or Jewish ideas that you would connect with those rooms in the house. And the truth is as well, like we've just spent a tremendous amount of time at home during COVID. And I think that regardless of how we spend our lives now, hopefully now we won't ever have to go back to those restrictions again, but just bringing that Judaism into our lives in our home is a really powerful thing to think about. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to use your chat function on Zoom, and I'm going to give you a name of a room, and I'd like you to just put in the chat any Jewish ideas that you would connect with that. What we are doing tonight, actually, when I did it in South Africa, I've prepared different things for you, and I've definitely modified it and worked on it since then. But what I did then was that this was how we built curriculum that became a course. So in theory, this is part one of what could be a longer course. If you ever want me to come back, I'd be happy to do more. But we're doing part one today. So I'm going to give you the name of a room. And please do just type in whatever Jewish ideas, if you have any that you think you would associate with that. So the first one is the front door. What Jewish ideas or Jewish items would you associate with the front door? Let's see what comes up. A mezuzah, yes. What else? Mezuzah. Welcoming guests. I think those were the main ones that I had. Mezuzah, welcome. Exactly that. That's what I would think of. I would think of mezuzah as an obvious one. It's how you see escorting guests, right? So part of welcoming guests in is escorting them as well, not just to make sure they leave, but there is, well, we're actually going to look at that a bit more. Carrying a nod, that's very interesting. You mean on Shabbat, carrying, okay, lovely. I don't live in an Arab, so that's very necessary for us to think about in Ilford. Chuppah, 4 doors, that's a really nice idea. Really nice idea that's kind of open on all sides. I think that's also an idea of welcoming and having an open home. Okay, gorgeous. Those are some really wonderful ideas. Let's move on to the next room. Let's think of the kitchen. What Jewish ideas or Jewish items, we don't have to go through every single item of cutlery, but what Jewish ideas or items would you associate with the kitchen? Kashrut. Right. What else? We're Jewish, we like food. What would we associate with the kitchen? Right, hold on, there's a whole bunch that just came up there. Kashrut, food, cooking, good. Hand washing, right, washing our hands before we have bread. Kashrut, entertaining, lovely. That could also be part of welcoming guests as well. Festival, Shabbat, definitely. Separation, what do you mean by separation? Do you mean separation of milk and meat? Okay, the urn, good. Definitely find that. There were a few others that I thought when we finish doing this, so then I'm going to show you slides that I've made with the ideas that I had on them. But definitely on that, washing hands, definitely. It's the center of the home. That's very nice. I actually, just as a sidebar, I actually went to a house in America once. I was at a conference and I went to a family for Shabbat that I hadn't met before, and they'd built their home from scratch. They actually built the dining room as the center of the home, that when you came in, that's what you saw, because we often compare the table to the altar in the temple, which was the center of everything. And they built their home around that, which was gorgeous. Okay, Pesach, we don't want to say the P word, but yes, Pesach, that's a big one for the kitchen. Cleaning items, keeping them separate, a table for eating together, that's very nice. It can be a quite family space as well. Any last ideas? Okay, so then we'll move on. Let's go to the lounge. What Jewish items or ideas would you connect with the lounge? It's a bit of a harder one, actually. Reading and peace, yes. Candlesticks. Depends where you keep them, but some might have them in the lounge, definitely. Yes, candlesticks. Anything else for the lounge? Beauty. Yvonne, would you mind writing a little bit more what you mean about beauty? That's such a nice idea. Kiddush cups and Havdalah, entertaining. Oh, cuddles, I love that. Chanukiah. That also, I had kind of on my front door thing as well. In Israel, you'd have it by your front door. But yes, in my house, it's in the lounge. What do we have? Shalom Bayit, beautiful. Making connections. Just being with people, being with family, being with friends. Being with friends and family, exactly. I love that. I'm just waiting to hear from Yvonne what she meant by beauty. Could you put in an extra couple of words? Okay, let's move on a bit and see if Yvonne puts it in the chat. The next room, also an interesting one, is the bathroom. What Jewish ideas would you associate or Jewish items would you find? Obviously, there's no mezuzah on the door, but what would you connect with the bathroom? Asher Yatzar, right, the bracha that we say after we go to the bathroom, privacy. Sometimes with very small children, that doesn't happen. Or pets. Mikveh preparation, very nice. Hand washing, cleanliness, washing, purification. I love these, really nice. I think those are most of the ones that I had as well, actually. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Let's go to the bedroom. A reflection. Was reflection for the bathroom? Is that reading? Getting ready for Shabbat. Mirror. Okay, so we've gone to the bedroom. Okay, lovely. Getting ready for Shabbat, the mirror, a reflection of the mirror in the bathroom. Okay. In the bedroom, what would you associate Jewishly with the bedroom? Relationships, peace, sex. Taharat mishpacha, right? The laws of family purity. Definitely. It's one of the things that we train specifically in on the Mayam program. Sleep, halavai, yes. Shema and Hamalach, right? The Shema that we say at night before we go to sleep. Dreams and wishes. That's really interesting. I mean, there is a whole Jewish idea about dreams. That's a whole talk in itself. What do you mean by wishes? The thoughts going through your head as you go to sleep, right? waking up as well, right? The opposite end of the day, when we wake up in the morning, there's a whole Jewish approach to how to wake up and get up in the morning. Okay, very, very nice. Okay, 2 more. The neshama returning to Hashem at night, very nice. That's an idea that every night's partly why we have to wash our hands 3 times in the morning, because our soul has left us, and sleep is a kind of very small percentage reflection of what it's like to pass away. So we kind of wash our hands in the morning to wash that off. Okay, we're going to move on to the dining room. What Jewish items or ideas would you connect to the dining room? I'm sitting in mine so I can look around and see what's in here. The Shabbat table. Seudas, meals, festive meals, entertaining again. Food and hospitality, togetherness, lovely. Seder night, sharing people, what was that? It's just coming so quickly that I'm trying to catch up. Sharing meals with people that we love, I love that. Seder night, family items on the sideboard, of course, salt, right? We actually use salt on the altar, that's part of why we have salt on the table. Sefarim, Jewish books, yes, we have them in mind. Benching after meals, grace after meals, 100%. Looking around my dining room, I've got my candlesticks are in here. And all my like table Judaica, like my Kiddush cups and stuff are all in here as well. Okay, that was a lot of great ideas. And the last one is the garden. What Jewish ideas? Oh, 1 second, when we say printed Eshet Chayil prayer, oh, that's so lovely. We sing that on Friday night. So what would you associate with the garden, Jewishly with the garden? The sukkah, exactly. Sukkah goes outside. Renewal and growth. Definitely. The moon. The moon is very interesting because we do connect with that through Rosh Chodesh. We bench the moon. That's right. Nature. I was thinking also environmentalism connected to nature as well, the way that we treat the environment, family, beauty, natural beauty, and marveling in Hashem's world. Entertaining and davening during lockdown. Which one was that? Was that for the dining room? Was that for the garden? Oh, of course, in the garden, right. We couldn't have people in our houses. Fruit and vegetables, right, natural things. No, in the garden, right, thank you. Yes, we did. We had to sit outside, 6 people in the garden. Amazing. So we've just come up with a tremendous list of different concepts that Jewishly we could connect. And there's more. I mean, I didn't put on, like, for example, the attic. You might keep family heirlooms in the attic and think about Jewish history and your family history and genealogy and, where your family comes from. And, I didn't do the garage, where we might think about the car and the blessing we say if we're all going on a long journey, Tefillah Haderech. We might have a bike in there for exercise. Like there's so much richness in our Jewish life that happens in and around the home. So I'm going to show you my list. 1 second, let me just close the chat just for now. And I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Oh, hold on, actually, to minimize this first. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see my slides? Give me a thumbs up if you can see where it says there's no place like home. Thumbs up, excellent. Okay, so this is what we're doing today. This is just the introduction one. There's no place like home, a tour of Jewish ideas around the home. So an overview of the concept we've done, and a quick tour around the home. We've kind of done that as well. I'm going to show you my slides, and then we're going to look at the front door. So the first one that we looked at, I hope this is going to change. Why is it not changing? I did try this before and now it's not working. There we go. Okay, the front door. So these were the ideas that I had. So I had mezuzah, as you had, welcoming guests, which we're going to look at in more detail tonight. Hanukkah candles, because we're meant to put them in a place where it's for public, for everybody to see. And in Israel, certainly a lot of people have like glass boxes by their front door, and they would put them out by the front door. That's why I thought of that. And Tefillah HaDerech, the prayer that we say when we go on our way, if we're going on a long journey. In fact, I must tell you, the other day, you remember the storm a couple of weeks ago on the Friday? So we actually had a week off that week, and we went to stay with friends for Shabbat. And my parents in Israel were watching the news, and they were terrified about how bad the weather was. They thought it was going to be like Dorothy in Kansas and houses flying through the wind. And in all seriousness, my older daughter said, I really think we should say Tefillah HaDerech before we drive around the North Circular. And we did, because it was potentially a dangerous journey. So Tefillah HaDerech, when we go on the way, we do say, on a long journey, we would say a prayer for that as well. Okay, so let's go to the next one. We went to the kitchen. So I had a couple of, an extra one that you had. So keeping kosher is obviously, that's the first thing that come to mind. I thought about brachot and blessings. There are different blessings that we would say on different kinds of food. And actually the whole theory behind brachot and why we even make them and what they're there for, because God doesn't really need our praise, because Hashem doesn't need anything. So the whole idea of making a blessing is very interesting as to who that's for. So that's a whole category that we might associate with the kitchen as well. Netilat yadayim, washing our hands. I think somebody said that, washing before we have bread, and Pesach, the dreaded P word, although actually a very wonderful P word as well, although we have Purim coming up first. But yes, that's Pesach's coming up very soon. That's a big one to do with the kitchen. And then we went to the lounge. So I had in there also family time, educating children, and the time, sometimes the informal conversations that we have with our kids. It makes a huge difference. I think that kind of reflects what some of you said about being together and cuddles and love and being with people that you love. I put Jewish books on there, knowing which books are for what in Judaism and how we prioritize them. Like, we've got Jewish books in our lounge. Some of them might be just Jewish style reading books, but also like Chumash and Siddur, like we often have those things in our house. And I also put on there Shiva, because unfortunately that does happen, and often the place where we sit and where people come in to visit is also in the lounge. So I thought that was a Jewish topic that I would associate with the lounge as well. Then we move on to the bathroom. We covered this. So washing hands in the morning, also washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, and saying the bracha v'asher yatzar, which is really just thanking Hashem that our body works. I mean, anyone who's ever been ill, who's ever had a tummy bug, or who's ever, I mean, I'm not going to go into details not to be gory, but you can think about it. Anyone whose body hasn't functioned properly appreciates how difficult that can be and how amazing it is when your body works well. My older daughter is now 14, but she was born at 28 weeks and she was very, very tiny. And just seeing her body starting to work and learning the number of things that can go wrong, God forbid, and seeing how amazing and miraculous it is when it goes right. Actually, that's what Asher Yatzar is all about. And we associate that with the bathroom. So then the bedroom. So we said the family purity laws, Taharat Mishpacha. It's something that on the Mayan program we're taught about quite extensively, both from a halachic point of view, going all the way from the early sources in the Torah and in the Gemara, and coming through to practical situations that we may deal with now, and also in terms of medical and just general women's health. There's a whole unit that's covered by UCLH that we do through them as well. So that's something that we're quite trained on as well. And it's a big one too at the bedroom. I thought about modest dress. We get dressed in our bedroom, and the way that we dress, Jewish clothes, I would associate with the bedroom. And as people already said, getting up in the morning, washing our hands, and the bedtime Shema that we say at the end of the night, and the extra things that we say as well as Shema. There's some very beautiful things that we say there as well. Let's continue our tour to the dining room. These were all covered. You came up with all of these as well, Shabbat and festivals, benching after meals, and Havdalah. I think Havdalah came in a different room. It depends. We make ours in the dining room. Everyone does their own thing. But all of those things, there's a lot of being around the table and celebrating that goes on in the dining room. And I think you actually had some extra things as well. There were some Jewish books in there as well. And then we'll go out to the garden. So we have the sukkah and the environment. I think those were the two main ones that we came up. So that's pretty much like a whistle-stop tour around the house. And in a way, it's a way of making a house, not just a house, but a Jewish home. And all of these things are topics that we could discuss in and of their own right. And there are many, many more that we could add to it as well. So in terms of this topic of thinking of the Jewish home and the richness of the Jewish life that we can have in our home, regardless whether we live on our own, whether we have a spouse, whether we have children, many of these things are just independent of all of that. And they're just amazing concepts that we can learn that give us such a rich Jewish life. And for me, I think it's so amazing that, you know, we have Jewish ideas and mitzvot that literally take us from the minute we open our eyes in the morning and the first words that come out our mouth until we close our eyes and fall asleep at night, and that take us from the minute a child is born until the minute somebody passes away. Like Judaism is not, I used to, a long time ago, when I used to teach teenagers, sometimes I would do an activity with them whereby I would give them a pie chart and I would ask them to divide it up into everything they do in their week. And a large chunk of it would obviously be school, and some would be friends and going out and watching TV and relaxing. And some of them would sometimes put in a Jewish segment as well. And I often ask them, like, sometimes they didn't, sometimes they did. And I'd ask them what that Jewish segment was. And sometimes that would be a bar mitzvah lesson, or it would be going to shul on Shabbat, or if they go to a Jewish school, it might be that. And so what I would say to them is, so I would do my week of all the things that I do. And then I would take a colored pencil and say, I'm going to show you how much of my week I do Jewish stuff. And I would shade over the entire circle. Because no matter who we are or where we are, whether we're in our home, whether we're in our cars, we're Jewish all the time, and it comes with us. And I think that's such a beauty about Judaism, that it pervades into everything that we do. And it's who we are. It's who we are, and it comes with us everywhere we go. So what I'd like to do now for the remainder of the time that we have is I want to focus on the front door. Let's go back to the beginning of the house, and I want to think about the front door. So I'm just going to stop screen sharing just for a minute because I can't see as many of your faces when I'm on screen share. And I just want to think a minute about what a door actually is. So a door in and of itself, it might sound very obvious, but a door is a boundary. And obviously, assuming it works, your hinges are oiled, a door can open and a door can close. And I think this idea of boundaries is really, really important because, especially when it comes to our house, it has a dual function. It has the function, as we've said, of being open to welcoming people into our houses. Like someone mentioned, the chuppah is open on four sides. And one of the things we're going to think about a little bit is Avraham and his tent. His tent was open on all sides so that people could come in. And that's amazing to have an open door policy and to have people coming in your house. But at the same time, sometimes we need the door to be shut, because sometimes we need that door to either protect us, God forbid, if there's an unwanted influence that we want to keep out of our house. And sometimes we just want to spend time just with the people inside as well. And also, it keeps people in. It can keep people in, it can keep people out. And it has that dual function of doing both of those things. And I think, obviously, I mean, unfortunately with COVID, this is all too fresh in our minds, but safety of the people inside the house and on the inside of the door is obviously going to be paramount. And that's something we have to think about, again, no matter who we live, whether we live on our own or with our spouse or with children. The safety on the people on the inside is really, really going to be the most crucial thing we have to think about first of all. And then after that, we kind of have to think about how we're going to navigate those boundaries of who we let in. And I think, we live in a world today where, when I grew up, the front door was the only way that people came into your house. If you wanted people in, you opened the door, you invited them, or you had the telephone. That was it. We live in a world today where there are multiple portals where people and influences can come into our homes. And I think that the idea of a door today is probably more broad than the physical door with a key, because we can have influences and people who come into our lives through the internet, like I'm talking to you tonight, through TV, through tablets, through phones, social media. There are so many ways that people and influencers can come into our lives. And I think that thinking about that idea of a door and a boundary and the things that we want to keep in and the safety of the people inside, and what we really need to keep out for our safety or our children's safety, is a really important thing to think about. It's not a conversation we're going to have here fully, but just wanted to mention it, that I think this idea of a door today definitely extends to digital doors as well as physical doors as well. But I do want to think now about the door as a physical door and the way that people come into our house. And although the first thing that everybody jumped on and that I thought of as well when I thought of the door is a mezuzah, I want to focus on the idea of welcoming guests, because thank God we're in a time where we're able to do that now. There's been a lot of time that we haven't been able to. Certainly working in a shul, it's been very quiet, not having guests. We were having guests 3 to 4 Shabbos a month before COVID. Almost every week we had guests coming for Shabbat. And then we had nearly 2 years when we couldn't do that. And even now, the community that we're in has a lot of people who are still very, very scared about COVID. It hasn't disappeared. And we're still very cautious of the number of people that we invite, because people are nervous. And, you know, obviously my older daughter is vaccinated, my younger daughter is now eligible, but she hasn't had her vaccine yet, and that makes people nervous. So welcoming guests, I think, is actually a very topical thing to think about in terms of the world that we're living in. So I want to go back to screen share, and let's look at this again. So this idea of, you can all see my screen, right? Thumbs up if you can see it. You can see the screen? Marvelous. Okay, so this idea of welcoming guests is very, very fundamental. And we actually say it every morning. Every morning, we have some preliminary brachot that we say about learning Torah. And then we have 3 different verses that we say after that. And this is the 3rd one. And I just have to, hold on one second. Let me just shrink that a little bit so I can see it. Okay, so it says, these are the precepts, these are the precepts, which the fruits of which man can enjoy in this world, while the principal reward is for the world to come. We're not going to unpack this. There's a lot to be said even just on that sentence about the world to come. But there are various principles. And the one, I'm not going to read them all. You can read them yourself if you like. But the one I want to focus is what I've written in red, is v'hachnasat orchim, providing hospitality to guests. So this is an idea that we say every single morning, is a principle that is really important, that we enjoy in this world. We get something from it in this world, but the principal reward that we get in the world to come. And again, I mean, actually, let's look at some of the things that are on here, because we've got other things that are really like honoring your parents, acts of kindness, attending a house of study, going to learn Torah morning and evening, visiting the sick, making a wedding, accompanying the dead to the grave, focusing on the meaning of prayers, and making peace between fellow men and between husband and wife. They're really big deals. They're not trivial things. And that means that providing hospitality and having guests is not a trivial thing either. It's a really big thing. And then look at this last bit. The study of Torah is equal to them all, right? Like in Judaism, the Torah it's our lifeline. It tells us how to function in the world. And this is saying that one of the things that's equal to Torah study is welcoming guests. That's how important it is. So it's a really big deal. As I say, we say this every single morning. But what I want to focus on is the main part. Actually, before that, just to mention that the idea of welcoming guests is part of the mitzvah of chesed. It's part, and it comes from the idea of that we should love our fellow as we love ourselves. Which means that when we have guests in our home, we should think about how we would want to be treated if we went into somebody else's home. What are the things that would make us feel comfortable? So whether you're just going as a Shabbat guest or whether you're going to stay overnight, there's some really lovely things I've seen done that when I've been a guest in people's home and I try to adopt them. So one of them was, there's a family that I'm very close with who live in America, and I used to go and visit them quite often. And whenever they would meet me at the airport, they would have a bottle of fresh cold water that they just bought to greet me after a long flight from London to America. And it's something that I try and do if I greet people at the airport, is to make sure there's like a nice refreshing bottle of water that I've just picked up that they can have. And when I would stay in their house, they would always make sure that, again, there was a bottle of water in my room, there was a box of tissues in my room, just like those basic things. I mean, obviously sheets and towels we would do, but just those little extra things just that I wouldn't have to ask. Like if I'm thirsty in the night, I've got a bottle of water in my room. And also as a guest around a Shabbat table, and something that I try and do every time we have guests, is just to tell everybody, like if the food's all on the table, tell everybody what everything is. Because sometimes it's not obvious, and sometimes people don't know, and sometimes there's things people don't like. I mean, I always try and ask first, is there anything you don't like? Is there anything you don't eat? Any allergies? Because the worst thing, and it happened once before when I forgot, and everything, even some of the salads had meat in them, and I had a vegetarian guest. And I was mortified because I would never want someone to come in and feel uncomfortable or to leave hungry. So something that I try and do is when I've put everything on the table is to tell everybody what everything is. And often it's really lovely. There's lots of conversation going on and people forget, but I really encourage people to pass things around, or I serve everybody. Because again, as a guest, you might see something down the bottom end of the table and think, oh, I really want to try that, but I don't want to ask, or I don't want to reach. And I don't want anyone to think like they didn't have access to something that they wanted. So to try, and it sounds like a very basic thing, but to make sure that everything gets passed around, I sometimes make a joke, it's like we should have one of those tracks like in a sushi restaurant, and like it comes around in front of you and you can pick everything up. But if we make a human sushi track, and then everybody gets whatever they want. Because again, that can be really uncomfortable if you think, that looks really nice, but I can't reach, or I don't want to ask. And you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. So those basic kind of things. I think, again, how would you like to be treated as a guest in someone else's home? That's what Ahavta l'recha kamocha means, treating your friend and your neighbours and your guests as you would want to be treated yourself, and welcoming guests as part of that category. And then also I was thinking, like, let's imagine there was a world where no chesed was necessary, where everybody had what they needed. Could you imagine that? Like, imagine if there was a world where no charity was required, no food. I mean, it's very kind of like John Lennon in Imagine, but like, imagine that kind of world where nobody wanted for anything. And I was thinking, like, on the one hand, that would be amazing. There would never be anybody who would want, but I actually think that there's something that we get out of being a giver. That if nobody, I mean, again, you never want anybody to be short of money or food or clothing or basic necessities, shelter. But there is certainly something, I mean, we say it comes from Tehillim, like Olam Chesed Yibaneh, that the world is built on kindness. That I think that there's two sides to kindness. On the one hand, there's the concept that your giving should be driven by the need of the recipient. So, for example, I don't know if you saw today, it was flashing up all over my social media, that Gift, which is an incredible charity that do amazing work making sure that people have food and all kinds of things. I mean, they just keep expanding their services. But they were asking for children in Ukraine or coming from the Ukraine that they needed snack food for the children. And they were very specific to say, like, we only need snacks. Like everything else had been provided. Like if you show up there with like sheets and bedding and tins and raw pasta, that's not helpful because that's not what they need at this time. That's not what Gift were asking for. There have been other donations that I've seen. One just came up tonight in Essex near me. They're asking for clothes and sheets and bedding and all that kind of thing. But that our giving should be driven by what the person needs. Because actually, if you try and smother somebody and give them something that they don't need or don't really want, it can actually be counterproductive. And I think that becomes more about our need that we want to give and we want to put on other people that can actually become a burden for them. It's not helpful for the recipient to give them something that they don't need or they don't want. So on the one hand, the giving should be driven by the need of the recipient. On the other hand, when you do that, the flip side is that you feel good, that you've actually helped somebody in the way that they need. So, and that is something that refines us. All the mitzvot, as a general principle, are there to refine us, to help us to become better people. And I think that by giving, by doing chesed, we become more refined people, we become better. So in a world where there's no need, on the one hand, that could be amazing, as I said, but on the other hand, I think we miss out on that self-refinement that we get on thinking about another person, thinking about what will actually be helpful for them, putting ourselves in their shoes a little bit and responding to that need. So let's look a little bit. I'm going to go ahead one more source. If there's any questions, by the way, or anything that I say that's unclear, please do put it in the chat, or anything that you want to add. Hopefully it will just pop up on my screen if you do add something. And if not, Barbara will unmute and wave at me and say, take notice, someone put in a comment. But I think the first, sorry, just caught my breath for a second. I think the first and probably key source when it comes to welcoming guests, we've mentioned a couple of times, is Avraham and his tent. And just to look at this, so this is, I'm going to have to shrink all of your lovely faces so I can see this. So this is from Bereshit, from the 18th chapter of Bereshit. I've cut out, you can see, although I've written at the top it's 1 to 16, I've actually cut out verses 9 to 15 because they weren't relevant to this topic exactly. So this is Avraham. We'll read through it. What we'll do is we're going to read through it, and then I'll go through and try and pick out what things we can learn about how to welcome guests from this key source. If there's anything that you see, again, please do put it in the chat, but otherwise I'll walk you through it. So it says, Hashem appeared to him, to Avraham, by the plains of Mamre, and he was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw 3 men standing near him. Seeing this, he ran from the entrance of his tent to greet them, and bowing to the ground, he said, "My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought, bathe your feet, and recline under a tree. And let me fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves. Then go on, saying that you have come your servant's way." And they replied, "Do as you have said." So Avraham rushed into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 seahs of choice flour," which, by the way, is a gigantic amount of flour, "knead and make cakes." Then Avraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, not just any old calf, but a perfect, wonderful, beautiful one. And he gave it to the lad who'd hastened to prepare it. And he took curds and milk. They didn't keep meat and milk at that time, and the calf that had been prepared, and he set these before them, and he waited on them under the tree as they ate. And then the men set out from there, looking towards Sodom, and Avraham walking with them to see them off. So let's break this down bit by bit as to the different things. In fact, let me see, what's the first thing that you notice that you think can teach us a lesson about welcoming guests? What's Avraham doing when these people come by? Where is he? And why is he there? It's not a test, it's whatever you think. Yeah, he's waiting in the doorway for people to come by, exactly, right? He's very proactive in looking for his guests. And actually, what we're told is that he just had his Brit Milah, and I don't have boys, I only have daughters. But from what I understand, I mean, in truth, when you have any kind of surgery or operation, once the anesthetic wears off, it can be quite painful after a couple of days. And he was looking for a way to serve others, right? Exactly. He's been very proactive in that. So this is day 3 after his Brit Milah, which was incredibly painful for him. And actually, the idea that the day grew hot, normally the Torah doesn't comment on the weather. It does comment on the weather at Pesach when we came out of Egypt, which again is a topic in itself, that Hashem made it a perfectly beautiful spring day. But normally the Torah doesn't comment on the weather. But the reason that it says that the day was hot was because actually Hashem didn't want Avraham hosting guests right now. He was in pain, he just had his Brit Milah, he should be inside resting and getting better. And nonetheless, Avraham is still actively sitting out. And not only that, it was also in the heat of the day. It was in the afternoon. Anyone's ever been to a hot country? I know Barbara's just come back from Israel, right? Having lived in Cape Town as well, it can get extremely hot. We had one day it was 42 degrees, which was just bonkers. But that's not common. But the afternoon is often the hottest time. So in the heat of the day, on a day that Hashem deliberately created, he was thinking distraction. Okay, could have been distraction for his discomfort. I actually think that I think maybe I would say that it was, he was trying to ignore his discomfort and carry on as he always was. And he was actively looking for guests. And hold on, let me take my notes. We actually, it reminded me when I was thinking about this, that when my older daughter was younger, when we were first working as youth directors, she used to get really frustrated if we didn't have guests. She was like, it's really boring without guests. She would walk around the Kiddush on Shabbos morning in Shul at about 4 years old. Hi, I'm Maya. Are you our guests? Are you our guests? You know, she just tried to like just invite people all the time, which was just, I mean, thank God we have a child that's very happy to have guests in our home. I have 2 children who are very happy to have guests in our home, but it was really like, it was an active going out and looking for people. And this is what Avram was doing. And I think also, you know, he, just to go on, just to the next bit, it says, looking up, he saw 3 men standing near him. Like, we know with hindsight that these weren't just men, these were angels. And they were coming with a very specific reason that he was coming. They were coming to give different messages of what was going to happen in terms of saying that Sarah was going to become pregnant, and saying that Sodom and Amorah were going to be destroyed. But he just saw them as 3 men. And actually, given where they lived and the time that they were living in, these people were probably just your average Arab who lived in the area, and most of them would have been idol worshippers. And regardless of the fact that this is totally opposite to who Avraham is, Avraham's the person who worked out monotheism for himself. And yet seeing these 3 men who were probably Arab idol worshippers, he runs out to greet them. And he's still so enthusiastic. And he calls them my lords on verse 3. Can you see here? He calls them my lords. Like, he sees these people just wandering, and he treats them like absolute kings and treats them with a huge amount of respect. And I think that a lesson we can take from this perhaps is, you know, it's very easy to invite our friends to our house and to invite people who are like us. And it can be very difficult and maybe even uncomfortable to invite people who are very different to us, or people who don't usually get invited, or also people who have fundamentally opposing views to us. And even though this was the case, Avraham is showing us an incredible lesson that he is inviting these people to come, and he's welcoming them. He's actively looking for people, even though they're polar opposites to who he is and everything he stands for. And he says, please do not go past your servant. Again, like, he's really treating them like royalty. But yet at the same time, he offers for them to be water brought and bathe your feet. And I think this is a very interesting idea when we were talking before about doors being boundaries and the things that we do allow in our house and the things that we don't allow in our house. Because part of the idol worship that they probably would have engaged in was that they bowed down to the dust on their feet. And Avraham decided that even though I would love these people to come into my house and be my guests, I don't want the dust of their idol worship inside. There's a boundary. So he was asked them to wash their feet, perhaps partly for comfort, they'd be walking in the desert, but also I think as a boundary for himself, that he's trying to keep that outside his house, which again shows us an amazing lesson that people and what they do, or people and their views, are not one and the same. There can be people who we don't like what they do, or we don't like what they believe, but they are not their beliefs. We can still have a respect for human beings, even if they believe things that are different to us, even if they act in a way that we might not like, and we can separate what they do from who they are. It can be very difficult sometimes, especially if people are like very much one type of behavior and it's particularly offensive. And again, we have to think of those boundaries and the doors and the safety of the people on the inside. You know, obviously you don't want anyone that's really going to be a threat coming in your house or bring something that you really, really don't like. But at the same time, sometimes it's necessary to reach out and invite people who don't normally get invited, even if we don't agree with them, and to build relationships with people, even if we don't love everything that they say or everything that they do. I think Avraham teaches us this lesson very, very strongly. And then again, just to keep on going, he runs out to see them. Right, hold on one second. Where was that? Because I've got half of it. Oh, sorry, that's verse 6. Let me just go before. So when he is, bathing the feet, we've spoken about, let me fetch a morsel of bread. Okay, so this is also, he's not trying to say to them in a very like Jewish mother kind of way, come in, have some chicken soup, have some, smoked salmon, like go mad. I was thinking he offered a little perhaps he's offering, exactly, Paula, we are on the same wavelength. Thank you. You've said exactly what I was about to say, with one mind, right? It reminds me of my late grandma in Dublin, that whenever we would pitch up at her house, no matter what time of day, there was always a huge table full of food. I'm sure we all know people like this. You come and say, have a cup of tea, and before you know it, there's cake on the table and sandwiches and, you know, chopped herring and like a million different things. And it's a lot, especially you might have just come from having lunch somewhere else and might not be hungry. And I think we do have that innate want to give to people, which is a wonderful thing to do. But he's offering a little water and a morsel of food, exactly as Paula has said. I think that because maybe a feast would be too overwhelming. And this is what we said before, that when we think about chesed and kindness, we've got to do it in the best interest of the recipient and think about what they might be comfortable to accept. And yet what's interesting is once they accept that, once they say yes and they accept that, then Avraham rushes in and he asks Sarah to start getting choice flour and kneading and baking and getting really busy. And what I also thought, there was something that came to mind to this, is that he leaves them outside. And I think that there may be two reasons for that. One may be because they've come and sat and he's just said to them, like, would you just want something small? And they're resting on the tree. He doesn't want to kind of like rush them into the tent. But also, maybe there's something about not showing the guests quite how much effort Sarah's going to. That sometimes if we have guests and we let them know exactly how hard we've worked and exactly how much effort went into this meal, again, it can make someone feel uncomfortable, especially someone, I'm not thinking about necessarily our friends or people who know us well, but even then perhaps with them, but these are strangers. He's never met them before. And to say to them, one second, I'm so sorry. Tell you what's the matter?
No, one of the plates.
One sec, Stephen. I'm so sorry. My daughter's just come in. Are you not feeling well?
No, it's just coming from you and I'm not really feeling well.
Okay, Stephen, Talia needs you. I'm so sorry. She just came down and she's not feeling very well. Okay, so let's just carry on. Sorry, I just lost myself where we were. Yes, about telling people how much effort we've gone to. That sometimes, again, that can make someone feel uncomfortable, especially if it's a guest or a stranger that's coming in our house to tell them how hard you worked, and maybe out of respect to them as well, and sensitivity to he's keeping all the busyness and all the hard work on the inside of the tent. I'm just going to speed up a little bit just because I'm aware of the time. But to look at what he offers and what he actually does. He's just spoken about a morsel of bread and a little bit of water, and suddenly there's so much being done. And there's a concept we talk about, amor ma'at va'aseh harbe, that we say a little and do a lot. I think this is very much him. He's talking about very simple things, but doing a tremendous amount. And actually, beyond the bread, he's getting a calf and shechting it and cooking it and producing milk and the curds and butter. He's giving them a huge feast. But look in verse 7, it says he gave it to the lad. And Rashi says that this is Yishmael, this is his son. They haven't had Isaac yet. This is what one of the angels is coming to tell them, they're going to have Isaac. But Yishmael has been born. And Rashi says that Avraham is training Yishmael in his obligation of hospitality. That when we entertain, it's a family affair. It's good for everyone to get on board. It's not just about parents, if we're in a household with children, it's not just about the parents entertaining, but actually it's a really good lesson in education for our children to welcome people in and to welcome them and extend our hospitality. And then the last bit as well is that he escorted them out. And this is actually, sorry, I just lost it for 1 second. My screen is jumping around here. Number 16. The men set out from there and they looked down towards Sodom, and Avram was walking with them to see them off. This is actually part of the obligation of welcoming guests, is to see them out, not to make sure they leave, but actually to make sure that they go safely on their way. And actually the term for that is levaya, which is the same as we sometimes refer to a funeral. Because in a funeral, we're escorting the body on its final journey to its resting place, and we're escorting the soul on its journey out of the world. And we have a responsibility to the people we come, not just to say thank you very much and slam the door behind them, but actually to escort them on their way and make sure they get there safely. So I think all of those, for me, that's a tremendous amount of lessons that we can take from Avraham and the way that he deals with these strangers, on how he welcomed into his house, and to teach us how we can work with guests coming into our house as well. Does anyone have any questions or comments they just want to put on the chat? Because there's one other thing that I want to show you. It's slightly controversial, but I hope that you are all happy with a little bit of controversy. Okay, let's move on. So the last bit that I want to show you is a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. I love Pirkei Avot because it's so dynamic and it has a lot of psychology and wisdom in it. And I think, actually there was a conference on Sunday for lay leaders in communities. I think it's an annual conference the United Synagogue do. And a fellow Ma'ayan and colleague, Rebbetzen, Emma Taylor, one of the things that she was talking about was the value of having female educators. And I think that this Mishnah is best taught by a woman, and you'll see why. Let's just have a look at this Mishnah. So I brought most of it. I haven't brought the entire thing, but it says, Yossi ben Yochanan, a man of Jerusalem, Yeshua Omer, he says, I've done it in purple because, again, this is referring to what we've said, that your house should be wide open. So again, I just referred that because I think that's referring to guests. So I actually think the whole mission is about the home. And it says, let the poor be members of your household. And here's a slight controversy: to not engage in too much conversation with women. This is said with regard to one's wife. How much more so does the rule apply with regard to another man's wife? So because we're short of time, we could discuss this for a whole hour in itself, but I'm just going to whiz you through this Mishnah. I think that actually this whole Mishnah is about the home. And I think that this Mishnah works in concentric circles, going from the broadest application to a small, intimate circle. So let's work through it. The first bit, the first bit of opening your house wide. I think this connects to what we've been talking about on Avraham, that our house should be open wide, open on all sides. We should have open-hearted giving. And I think we could also understand opening wide, that we can also give from a distance. Sometimes it's possible to extend our giving to places that we literally can't even reach. Again, just thinking about the Ukraine as like a very topical issue, to give money, to give donations, to give moral support, to give prayer, to sponsor items that might be needed, or to donate something that will then be taken and distributed elsewhere. There's ways of giving that is wide, that's very big and can reach a tremendous amount of people. And also that our giving can be in many, many different ways. It can go, and for a wide range of people, we can give shelter or food or money or support or comfort. There's wide-ranging ways in which we can give, with our home being in the center, and it can radiate outwards. Taking a step inside, that the poor will be members of your household. This is talking about bringing people into your house. And I think that there's a few things that I just jotted down here that I thought would be, that we can learn from this, is that when you bring someone into your house, particularly someone who's needy, it's talking specifically about the poor, to treat them as a member of your family. To not treat them, first of all, not to think that you have to be perfect or not at all. We wouldn't do that with family. With family, we say, come, find us as we are. Yeah, I said this to my sister actually last weekend, we're home Friday night. If you want to come, just pitch up. We're here. We say that to family, knock on the door, come whenever. And you wouldn't want to make somebody who's in need feel like it's got to be all perfect around them. Make them feel comfortable, part of your home. Not to be too much on ceremony, as we've said before. It can make people uncomfortable and actually be counterproductive with too on ceremony and too over the top in the way that we give. And also, I don't think we would ever make family feel bad for being needy or point out their neediness. It can be quite shaming and quite embarrassing. We would just give because we love, and we would give unconditionally. And I think that this is also part of this idea that if there's somebody in need who's coming into our house, just to do it almost so that they don't think there's too much thought gone into it, that it's not pointing out their neediness. And then the last bit about do not engage in too much conversation with women. This is getting right into the concentric circle of our closest relationships. The reason why I put it in red, tarbe sicha, too much conversation, is because it doesn't say don't speak to women at all. It talks about too much. And also the word sicha, the verb lesachsech, it means to chat. It's light-hearted, frivolous conversation. And what I think this is getting at is that our most meaningful conversations, the ones that happen on the inside of the door with husbands and wives, I think we could extend this to our children as well, is we need to take them seriously. Is it because it says this is regards to one's wife, how much more so to another man's wife. So I think what it means is that on the closest relationship we have, we also have to do chesed with our family as well. And we shouldn't just be like frivolous and chatting and just banter all the time, that we need to speak seriously and have proper conversations with the people that we love and the people that mean the most to us. And of course, we're going to have fun as well, but not to the detriment of real conversation and real connection. And ultimately, this connection through words and through conversation and many other things is going to expand the love that we have with our families and our home. And then when saying this to one's wife, how much more so to another man's wife, the way that I understand that, again, it doesn't say don't speak to women at all, but we shouldn't have too much light-hearted chat with other people's spouses, and that it should never be the case that we have more to say to somebody else's husband and wife than we do to our own. That we need to make sure that the relationships that are really important, we put the most value on. And as I said in the beginning, I think what this whole Mishnah is about, again, I think it's about just generally about the home, a way that we treat our home, the way that we use our home, and about having those boundaries and making sure that we have the door open at the time it should be open and closed and focused on the inside at the time that it should be closed, and making sure that we treat everybody with the right amount of respect and the right amount of conversation in order to welcome people and treat everybody with kindness and really fulfill this important important mitzvah. We are bang on 9 o'clock, so I'm going to stop. But I just wanted to, hold on one second, let me stop screen sharing. Are there any questions or any comments? Again, I know this mission was like a bit of a bombshell to leave you with at the end. Maybe you'll come back another time and discuss it. But was there anything that anyone wanted to ask or add or?
That's really, Siobhan, really, the creativity and everything was just absolutely phenomenal. I'll leave Barbara to close. I just, it's amazing. So thank you for sharing.
Just to say,
thank you.
Thank you for a really fabulous presentation. It was really lovely. Thank you for getting us all involved the way you have. And hopefully we will continue the conversation in the next room of the home.
Yes, that would be so nice. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to see you. I know there's familiar faces on here and familiar names. And I can see some private messages coming up as well. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's really been a pleasure. And yeah, just thank you. I just wish you all well.
All right, thank you.
So there's Tov, everyone, and thank you.
Yeah.
Again.
Good Chodesh.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye.
Oops. So let's stop.